Welcome to another episode of the Tom Golly Official Podcast. With me today is one of the most respected, whether he realizes it or not, one of the most respected and he's that guitar player that when people find out he's on your project, they're like, that's legit. And just you mention his name, that you know him, and you talk to a guitar player, they're like, whoa, you know Brandon Bagby. And that's who's with me today. Brandon Bagby, thank you for being here, man. You are awesome.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Tom.
Oh, it's just, and you know, you've actually played guitar on a couple of my projects, thanks to Jorge Lopez.
That's right.
Bringing you in on the project. And, we've crossed paths once on the road, which was a really great experience and nerve-wracking for me, because I was one of those really early people on the roster. It felt more like sound check. Yeah, I think it's like there's you and Ron Rawls, like dead center, and like nobody else. And it's like, hey, we're gonna perform for them, and
That's
you
right.
know, yeah. And every time you lean over and say something, it's like all of us collectively were like, what's he saying? What's he gonna say? Who's he talking about? But it was actually a really cool moment for my guitar player. It was JD Jordan Smith, who when he found out he was like possibly gonna meet you that day, he's like, no, dude, you have no idea. That is like hands down my favorite Christian music guitar player.
Oh,
period.
man.
And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, did you know that he's the one who came up with the solo in the song Keep Fighting? And he's just like, oh no, so I have to play something he wrote in front of him? I'm like, yep.
That's always nerve-wracking. I had a moment like that happened. It was a CD. It was I think it was this year. It's been a blur because of COVID, of course.
Yeah.
It was a CD release show at 3rd and Lindsley for a new country artist named Timmy Brown. And the producer was playing in the band as well. He was playing, I believe, guitar. He was playing guitar, rhythm guitar. And right before we get up to go play, he goes, oh, by the way, so-and-so who tracked all the guitars and lead stuff is, he's here tonight. Just letting you know. No pressure.
Yeah.
Just being funny, but that does put a little pressure because I'm having to remake what someone else created.
Well, what's wild too is the fact that the way I've crafted that portion of the song is I've always asked the guys, I said, you could do it one of two ways. I was like, I always doubled up that post-chorus solo just to give them a moment to kind of do something fun. So I'm like, I'd either want you to, the first half is do the record solo.
Right.
And then maybe the second half finish off with your own or vice versa.
Yeah.
So, he not only did what you played, but something else creative.
Sure.
And what he was still geeking out about was two things. One is that like backstage, you had kind of showed him like, oh yeah, let me show you this. And you showed him kind of a certain, because he was like, yeah, does it go like this or like this? And then you showed him like, yeah, here. And he was like freaking out that like, I learned how to play it directly from you. And then you tagged him on an Instagram post and he's just like, dude, it was his first time he's ever gone on the road with a band ever. Like he's played in bands and played in church forever, but like to hit the road, and he was just like so grateful. And it's I hope that's an encouragement to you, is that like how much the way you are with others really touches them. And you've always been a very big encouragement to me. I mean, even before, like, I think you only had done like guitar on like one song. And I was like, yeah, man, me and George are working together on another track. And, and you were like, yeah, it's exciting. And you've always just had a lot of really great words of encouragement for others. And I'm sure that I see that you're that for a lot of people. And I mean, so obviously in order to get to that point in your life where when you're encouraging or you're just there, or it means a ton, clearly you've had to have a journey that probably started somewhere where maybe that clearly wasn't the case. I mean, I don't think you just decided to start playing guitar and suddenly like you were a big deal to people.
Sure.
So like what did that journey look like for you? Where did it kind of start? And what has sort of been what has that been like, for you to get from basically, hey, I want to learn how to play guitar, to being a highly sought after guy who plays on all kinds of stuff these days?
Yeah. So, in 2009, I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 14.
Oh, wow.
And it was mostly, I'd say, kind of out of boredom in a way, because um, my first instrument was violin. Started that in 5th grade, and then when I was in 8th grade, my orchestra teacher said, "Hey, what kind of music are you into?" And I said, "Well, I'm really at the time I was listening to like this is '90s, so I was listening to grunge period stuff, So I
Yeah.
was into rock, Nirvana, the whole grunge period, Stone Temple Pilots, all that kind of stuff. And so I just love the sound of a guitar. And he said to me, his name's Terry Tellis. I think he lives in Texas now. And this was when I was in Louisiana. And he just said to me, he goes, if you play the music you enjoy, you'll stick with it longer.
Yeah.
And I took that to heart. And I was like, well, I don't love orchestra music, but I love rock and roll. So I saved my money up and bought an electric guitar when I was 14. So I was entering my 9th grade year of high school. And so my parents, we moved from, well, long story short, I was born in New Orleans, lived in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana until I was about 5. Then we moved to Nashville. My dad had a job opportunity up here. It wasn't music. And then he was able to start working from home. And so we moved back to Louisiana when I was like in middle school.
Oh, wow.
And then they decided, we were living in Baton Rouge, and they decided when I started my high school years, they were like, "Hey, let's move out to the country." So we moved. Yes, very much so. And so they bought 5 acres of land and built a house.
Oh, wow.
And we were so far out of city limits that the cable didn't run far enough. So we had no cable television.
Oh, wow.
So MTV was shut down for me, or Fuse television, or any kind of VH1 or any music television. So that outlet was gone. And so we had channels like 2 and 4 that came in kind of fuzzy. We were using like rabbit ears, if anybody knows what that is.
Like, I think maybe like you only get like the Andy Griffith Show or something.
Right. And the news. Pretty much. That's all you need, right?
Yep.
And so I had no resources, so I was just learning from cassette tapes by ear, and then I had a chord book. And so I had to self-teach myself guitar through just listening, which that's still huge even for me today in my industry. Like, I have to pay attention through listening a lot of times.
Well, and I'm sure at the time you probably were not super grateful, but
No.
you're probably grateful now.
I'm very grateful now because, I do wish I would have grown up in the age where, YouTube was around, and maybe I'd be a monster shredder. I don't know.
Yeah.
Having those resources. But then again, I'm thankful because I was able to utilize my ears. And so, but I started at 14, and then by age 21, I had my first pro gig while I was in college with an Integrity Music artist. And so I would go to college during the week, fly out on the weekends, and do arenas and different
Wow. Who was
things. This guy, his name was Jason Morant. And,
Oh, okay.
So it's been it was like 2004, 2005 time period. So I did that. I was terrible at guitar. I mean, I realized it really taught me a lot of things. It taught me about stage presence because I'd never been on an arena before. I learned an important thing about intonating your guitar because I'd listened back to recordings, and when I'm playing up high, it would be very flat and out of tune. And it was terrible. And I was like, golly, I was awful.
Yeah.
21-year-old, and so, but nobody ever told me, hey, go get your guitar intonated, or here's what pedals you need, or here's the kind of amp you need, because there was no forums or anything in that time period. You were just figuring things out yourself.
Yeah.
You were creating your own sounds. You weren't copying a bunch of other people. You were just trying to figure it out.
And there's a lot of people who might go back and listen to old stuff that they've done and defend it.
Sure.
Like, well, here's the reason that was that. And to hear you kind of just talk about like, man, I did this and it wasn't good. And you're not like beating yourself up. You're just looking at you're looking at it from like, I guess almost probably from this, if I'm hearing it right, you're probably talking it more of a sense of like, man, I'm glad I failed at that.
Yeah.
Because it allowed me to kind of recalibrate, recorrect, and the next gig I had, that wasn't quite the case.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, it's true because it's like I always want to better myself. I think we should
Mhm.
always be our best, not necessarily the best, but our best that we can be. And so I learned a lot from that. It was my first time, even in that time period, working with ears and tracks, 2004, 2005. So I need to learn how to play with a metronome.
Yeah.
And so that was just, it was a lot of learning lessons. And I just thought to myself, I'm 21, get to play on arena stages, and I'm not that good. And I just thought, well, why was I supposed to be there? And I think to myself that, honestly, I think God wanted me to be there to learn lessons.
Yeah.
That were crucial for me to, in the future, I guess he realized I would probably have a career doing this. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows all, so of course he knew
course.
it would add up to something.
Yeah.
So, I did that and graduated from college, and I was living in the Hammond, Louisiana area, which is about an hour from New Orleans or so. My parents are about an hour from New Orleans, and so Hurricane Katrina hit. So it was one of those things where I was in my last semester of school. I just needed to focus on getting that done. So I got my bachelor's degree. I got the quote unquote, good job. Started moving in from sales into management with companies and climbing the corporate ladder because I thought that's what I was supposed to do at that time period in my life. It's really what my parents wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And I came to a point in my career where I was like, if I keep going down this path, and never give music a go, I don't know if it's ever going to happen, and I just need to give it a shot. So it was 2009, 2008 was the market crash and everything, and so the company I was with, leadership team, they were furloughing workers and also putting people on layoff lists, and I thought to myself, this could be my moment. So I did it. I said, put me on the layoff list. I'm going to go to Nashville.
Wow.
And so I completely started my life over in Nashville with no friends, not knowing anyone. I knew one person, he was on that first gig with Jason, he's the music director for Chris Tomlin. And I just called him up. He's like, yeah, come crash with me for like a few days and you can just kind of check out town. So I came up for about 3 days. I met my new roommates from Craigslist. Yeah, I did.
Wow.
I literally responded to a Craigslist ad for people looking for roommates.
I would say back then, though, that Craigslist was a little less of a scary place. There's a lot more normal people using it.
Yeah, and Facebook wasn't prominent enough to as much of a networking tool as it is now.
Yeah.
Which, if you were doing it now, I'd say stay away from Craigslist, you know, but so I moved in with some strangers and, didn't have a job, no music work, nothing. And I got plugged into a church, and then from there, just started meeting people.
Yeah,
and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the norm. Most people that I know, I talked to about when they first moved to Nashville, had a similar story to me. Where like I think I was because I went from like living on Long Island, part of everything, because Long Island's it's a big small place. And it's very easy, especially in like kind of the church world, because there's really never was much of a music scene, and that kind of bothered me. So I was the guy who's like, well, I'm gonna get a cool PA system and then start calling churches and going, hey, I want to host an event here, and just to give my friends who were in bands opportunities to play. And what people are surprised to learn is that I probably facilitated more shows than I actually performed at. Because and part of that was like, well, if they, maybe people will reciprocate by when they get an opportunity, they'll ask me to be part of it, and I'll get to sing then. And it's too hard to run an event and also perform at it.
It is.
Which is kind of now what I do when I go out to tours. But when you got a band behind you, it's much easier. And
sure.
But at the end of the day, it's like my first 3 months here, it went from always being busy, always doing something to like, and everywhere I'd walk into a church and someone was like, oh, Tom, what's up? And I'm here in Nashville, like, I made a mistake. What am I doing here? And all I wanted to do was like go meet up at like the Tuesday night B-dubs hang that we had, me and a couple of my friends had. I just wanted to go there, or, you know, I just missed it. And I'm like, I what did I do? You know? And similar to you, it wasn't Craigslist, but I did find on Facebook an ad of a guy named Justin Forshaw, like, hey, I'm teaching guitar lessons. And I'm like, hey, I know that band. I'm going to go learn guitar from him. I don't know what else to do. Because at the time I kind of felt like God was like, learn instruments. And I learned very quickly by lesson 3, I'm like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
I just don't enjoy it.
Sure.
Part of it is too, I talk with my hands, and you've seen me perform. My hands don't stop moving. I can't do this. I feel handcuffed.
Sure.
And I'm like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
So in that process, it was like, I got to meet Jake Jones, and, you know, then he was like, hey, I'm looking to produce for artists. And that was the beginning of like, hey, I found people to work with. And it just sort of kind of kept spiderwebbing from there. And then I kind of got the guts to start, which I've never been short of like courage to walk up, and I'll walk up to anybody and go, hey man, my name's Tom. How you doing? And that just started to build recognition. It started to be where people, it's even now, it's weird. People who I don't know.
Yeah.
Know who I am.
Sure.
And I'm like, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but it feels like home again.
Yeah.
You know, go to an event like, hey, you're Tom Golly, right? Yeah. How do you know me? Oh, I've seen you on Facebook, which sometimes is scary too.
Sure.
You know, but I totally can identify with like that. You come to Nashville and you're kind of like, nothing's happening. And then something all of a sudden just sort of breaks for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like maybe you meet that one person and then things start happening. And, you know, so I mean, if anyone's listening to this wondering, hey, how do you get started in Nashville? First off, you show up. That's number one.
That's the big part.
Yeah. And, you know, I've had people on here say things to me like, people make a mistake moving here. And I think that's true. I think it does depend on what your goals are.
Sure.
You know, and I think it sounds like, you know, you and I were very similar in our healthy understanding of what's here for us.
Sure.
And for me, it was, I need to meet other people who are kind of playing in the big leagues, and hopefully those relationships can foster into creating something good.
Sure.
And that worked for me.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't work for everybody. And clearly it worked for you. So now, beyond that, you were here in Nashville, and I know that at one point you were with Audio Adrenaline.
Yeah.
Now that was like was that like the second? It was like the second coming of it, or
it was like so it disbanded, I think, in 06, 07, because Mark had lost his voice, and then they reunited a version of the band with Kevin Max fronting the band, and the whole goal of it was to bring awareness for Hands and Feet project that's down in Haiti. It's the orphanage that they've been funding. It's a mission down there. It's really awesome. If you don't know about it, you should check out handsandfeetproject.org. Mark and Will still run it, the original members of Audio A.
They were in Bleach too, weren't they?
No, that's Davey.
Oh,
Davey
okay,
Basinger.
okay.
So, but you're thinking of Jared Byers.
That's who I'm thinking of.
So Jared was in the reiteration of the band.
Oh, gotcha.
So the K-Max days. So he was part of that group, and then Dave Gazarian from Super Chick. It was like a super band.
Yeah.
It was it was great.
Yeah.
And Will was the only original member. And then some things changed, and then I was asked to be a part of it. So
that's awesome, man.
So yeah, so that was cool. That was just like, that was a really cool moment. It was a good season. They had challenges, of course, like with any season, you know, stepping into a role like that, because of course when you look back on it, yeah, it's odd because it's like there's no original members.
Right.
So why are you doing this?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it was confusing to a lot of people, not necessarily to fans, but I'd say to people in the industry.
Sure.
Found it confusing. I looked at it as this: if the goal was focused to bring awareness for Hands and Feet, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Because that's a mission I support and I love and I believe in. So that was my reason for getting involved.
Well, I understand the confusion, because then it almost feels like hey, it's a tribute band sponsored by the original band.
Right.
You know, which I mean, to be fair, it probably would have been better off marketing it like, hey, this is the official tribute band.
Sure.
You know, and I mean, because it's crazy the success tribute bands have these days,
Yeah.
and especially if there's a tribute band that the actual artist is like, those are the guys. And that happened on Long Island with Billy Joel.
Yeah.
There was a cover band called Big Shot, and the guy, his name escapes me currently, but the guy sounds like Billy Joel when he sings. Wow. I mean, it's not even like he's doing an impression. He just sounds like Billy Joel. And he's kind of this big, like he looks like a New York cop, you know, bald head, looks like he can throw you through the wall, but sings these beautiful emotional songs and just he crushes it. I mean, they would play a place called Mulcahy's, and like they'd have to do 3 shows that night because just they can't not sell out. He was so good. And I mean, to go to a real Billy Joel concert, you'd have to mortgage a house these days.
Sure.
You know? And it's the crazy story turns out where they had this big event, like this charity event, and so they actually booked his cover band to show up to, like, you know, to honor Billy. Mm-hmm. And Billy wasn't even going to perform. He was just showing up to accept some Long Island award. And he's like in a green room or something, and the band is sound check, and they're like, "Hey, you hear these guys, right?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're playing my records."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, that's the guy." He's like, "What?" So Billy actually came out to check the guy out. Fast forward maybe a year, Billy hires the guy to come and like play in his band to tour with.
Wow.
And basically, you know, and Billy Joel tells people sometimes, like during these shows, like, "This is my main man. He's got a killer band that covers me. Check him out." But he's asked the guy, like, "What are some of your dreams?" And like one of the guy's dreams was to sing like Ave Maria in like this big Italian like venue.
Yeah.
So he gave that to him. Like they're playing that arena, and he's like, "Hey, this happens." But what's so crazy is the guy sounds and plays so much like Billy Joel. Billy doesn't even sound check anymore. He does it for him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's nuts, yeah. But can you imagine being in a cover band and like, this guy's my hero. I've met him once or twice. To be like, "Yo, I'm in his band now." You know.
Well, you know, and if the cover band is really good, and if they're true to the artist or to the music, why wouldn't you want that person in your group? Because honestly, it's like they've studied it in and out. Like, that's the player I would want.
Right.
I
mean, that's why I'm finding there's a lot of worship bands nowadays that are in a lot of cases they're starting to like reach out to like the local mega churches when they're playing shows. It's one less person to carry on the van. It's like, "Hey, you got a guitar player in your mega church band," you know, and they're already like a Chris Tomlin cover band anyway. Yeah. So it's you can play all my songs.
It gets interesting. I get hit up a lot from managers and sometimes artists if they're traveling in a city and they need a drummer or a guitar player for a certain date because they don't have the budgets to travel with their guitar player or instrumentalist. Yeah. So I'll get hit up, and then I'll kind of like put out a feeler in the different city areas to try to find someone that would be fitting for that artist, for their style that I might know they're playing, you know. Yeah. So that is a thing, you know. That used to not happen. That used to not be a thing.
Well, I've been saying this for a while, like, because a lot of other independent artists like myself, you know, we almost always lament, like, "It's so hard to book." And I'm like, well, here's the problem. A lot of these churches that you're reaching out to, their band is better than you.
Yeah.
And it's not to be mean. So, and if all you bring is a Sunday morning worship kind of vibe to what you're trying to tour, what do they need that for? You got to bring something else, that to the table. We were at this like mega church, and man, like, the band was incredible. The singers were like, holy crap. Like, I'm like, they're opening for all of us. Whoa. And, you know, now to be fair, we went out, did it, watched the video later, and I'm like, they have the best sound people ever because our game was elevated, man. Like, I mean, it's one of my favorite videos to watch of anything I've ever done as a touring artist. It sounded insane. It looked insane. And I'm just like, but there's some big churches out there just doing huge things. And it's at such a high quality that I don't think 10, 15 years ago was the case.
No, it wasn't, because I think churches realize they have to have two very important things to get people at least grab attention. Two things I think is out the back. a great pastor, someone that can speak well, but also a good shepherd. And then second of all, the worship team. I mean, the worship has to be amazing, and then they want to create an experience, for the congregation. So I think those are two very important key factors to start getting someone involved to even come to church.
Yeah.
A lot of times what's sad is that most churches will have an amazing pastor, but terrible worship team, or just terrible like worship pastor, just like not in check with the spirit, or it could be the music could be terrible. And then sometimes it's the other cases, it's turned around where the band's amazing, the worship pastor's amazing, but the pastor's just like checked out. So it's kind of like every once in a while you will find the magical unicorn of the two that meld together.
Yeah, what I have found, sadly, is, and again, I don't mean this to bash or be mean or even be judgmental, and maybe it is, but there's a good amount of these churches that you see where it's like, okay, in some capacity, the lead pastor and the worship leader are clearly good buddies. And it almost feels like, hey guys, we started this clubhouse. We're the coolest ones here. And you also just like, and they just create this environment that just doesn't feel like a church. It feels more like it almost feels like it's a bit of a watered down, like, hey, idolize the staff, and I don't think they mean to do that. It's just sort of what happens.
I think it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of younger churches can be more like that, especially if it's more cliquish on the hip side of things, But I also know some young church plants that have amazing pastors that are in their 30s and then have amazing worship team, and they really just love on people and care about people. So I've seen both worlds, so I can't even say it's a generational thing. I just think it's how some things happen. And it's just out of your control. It's just the way it happens.
Yeah, it's guys like me. I like to get I got to get my hands dirty. I like to be part of whatever's going on. It's very hard to just show up and be a congregant for someone like me.
Sure.
So, and almost every church I ever go to, it's like, I always try to avoid filling out the card. It's like where it's that card that's like, are you a musician? Are you this? Are you this? It's like, well, yeah, I am, but and I've had those conversations where like, yeah, I don't really want to get involved, and then before you know it, like, I'm being tapped on the shoulder. We're having a problem with the soundboard. Can you maybe come help? But it's like, sure. And next thing you know, I'm the sound guy at this church. Or like, hey, I saw that, I didn't realize you were an artist. Would you sing a special on I'm like, sure. And then next thing you know, I'm part of the worship team or something. And it's like, dang it.
In the defense of churches, they need volunteers.
Oh,
and I'm noticing a large lack of volunteers a lot of times, especially in older churches. It's harder to find people to step up and play on a Sunday morning and volunteer their time, to the church.
Well, I think what I've seen with the volunteer model is a lot of times they're asking people who are, it's almost like, asking, a carpenter, for instance, hey, I know you do this for a living, but can you just come and give us your services for free? And in some cases, it's a more stressful and demanding than actually when you do it for pay.
Sure.
And that's sort of been the struggle when I've been a volunteer, is like, there's no limit to sometimes how much they'll ask of you, or even just how much pushback you get. And, it's like, hey, I want you to come utilize your skill set. And it's a lot of volunteer church sound guys who actually are well-versed in doing sound know what I'm talking about. Is you'll do it the way that's right and sounds good. But then, hey, so I feel like it was too loud. And it's like, well, it wasn't though. I mean, I had a dB meter. It was only 80 dB.
Yeah. The first question is, where were you standing?
Right. There's that, or if the bass rumbles the floor, oh my gosh, we're going to die. Like, and now you're asking a guy to take his craft and do it differently.
Sure.
And it's, and almost kind of have to apologize for doing it well. That's sort of what happens, I think, is, and not in all cases, obviously, but in a lot of, at least for me, anytime I've been part of something where it was volunteer, there was just never really a clear understanding of what was expected from what I expected from them. Often wasn't quite what I was going to get out of it, and vice versa.
Sure.
And that creates a lot of friction and a lot of like, oh, forget it, I'm not even doing this.
Sure.
Whereas I feel like at least with the stipend model, even if it's $50 a Sunday, at least whenever there's money involved, there's typically a clear understanding of this is what we expect, this is what you can expect. So that's why I do think there's a bit of a struggle, because almost anyone I know who's ever volunteered at church has had a lot of pulling their hair out moments because of like, this isn't what I signed up for, you know?
Yeah, I know guys that they get paid at church and they pull their hair out.
That too, yeah. I mean, there is that too, yeah.
I have a personal rule of thumb on that. So like if it's my own home church, I never want to take a check or payment or whatsoever. Because for me, it's like I want to give my time. And part of that, my testimony is that when I moved to Nashville, I didn't play in church for an entire year. That's because before I was playing 3 churches on a Sunday where I lived before moving to Nashville. And so church became a gig. And so I think God did not allow me for an entire year to play in church was to rekindle that relationship with him and refocus on him and not have to worry about the music side of things.
Right.
And so, but yeah, my rule of thumb, it's basically if it's my home church, I'm not charging whatsoever, and I'd love to give my time. If it's a church that's not my home church, I have a rate. And here's my typical expectations with that rate of what I will do. And we'll just go from there. And then if there's, other ways I can help, we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
I get that. And now you're still part of the same church that you've been for a while now.
A little bit. It's different these days. So the pandemic hit, I came off the road because everybody did.
Yeah.
And so this small church, we live in a small country town about 40 minutes south of Nashville. And friend of a friend, they found me through Instagram, and then they were like, they figured out, I live nearby, about 10, 15 minutes down the street.
Stalker.
Well, they need help. This is talking about older community churches having a hard time finding volunteers. And so I would go in and play electric guitar on a Sunday. And then I think later on, and that was in 2020, and so they started seeing that, of course, I do more. They learned more about what I actually do for a living, and so they realized they needed help in some other areas. So they've kind of brought me on a contract basis to help with music directing along with playing guitar. So I've been doing that. Ever since I think the third quarter of 2021. I've been
very cool.
Doing a little bit of that. So it's a good part-time thing. I mean, it's easy. People, there are challenges just like with any, job like that. And, but sweetest people, that they love Jesus. So
yeah, it's tough. 'Cause I'm assuming, this is just an assumption, that are you music directing volunteers or people who are maybe are you like, and all these volunteers like pros, or is it more like, is it just more of a hobby level kind of thing?
Yeah, the volunteers, I'd say hobby level.
Yeah.
And
that was something I struggled with. Like before I moved to Nashville, I was part of this. A friend of mine was the music director and worship leader at a Presbyterian church. Now I'm not a Presbyterian.
Yeah.
I came out of very, like when I went over to there, I was part of very non-denominational, or almost that leaned more a little bit of, on the side of, I don't want to say charismatic because that's not the word, but and not like full-blown Pentecostal either, but like more on the Pentecostal side, very exuberant, energetic, the type when the pastor's sermon, you get someone who's like, come on, hallelujah. Like, okay, to a Presbyterian church, which is much different.
It is very different.
But we were trying to change that, I found someone there told me, because I was really surprised at the way people would react to worship. And I'm like, wow, this was different. And he goes, yeah, man, that's why we're called the Frozen Chosen. Oh,
man. That's pretty funny.
But, I was always motivated for myself to be better, to learn. I want to do things that challenge me. I like, let's just let's all build something, you know, let's grow together. And it was frustrating because, you know, my buddy Jimmy, who was always very like, you know, it was kind of weird because I was like the mad scientist with the crazy ideas, and he's the one who's like, no, that no one's gonna trust me, man. It's not gonna work. And I'm just like, come on, we can do anything. Like I'm kind of like the Ferriss Bueller in the crew, you know, like watch me. And I ran into like sometimes, hey, you're asking this guitar player to play something in a way that he's just like, wait, what? Like, I mean, I asked a guitar player, hey man, you ever consider maybe getting a couple of pedals so you kind of have some effects? Because he literally just plug his, you know, he'd show up with weird guitars sometimes because like, hey, this was my brother's from 1973, and it was terribly intonated, but he could play decently, but he would always go direct into the amp, and that's it. And we're like, hey man, we'd love to maybe get a little delay on there or something. So I went out and bought him. I'm like, hey, I bought him a pot, like a Line 6 pot or whatever that was. I'm like, hey, man, check this out. And his first question is, well, is this digital? And I'm just like, why? He goes, well, I only play analog. I can't use this. And it's just like, oh, okay. And so we kind of were like, what if we told you have to? Well, then I'll just, you know, I don't need to be on the worship team. It was like, whoa.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, no problem, man. Keep doing what you're doing. No big deal. And
man,
then
if I had that attitude, I wouldn't have a job in music whatsoever.
Yeah. And then, you know, then we'd have the, you know, a girl who's on the worship team, and it's like, hey, so can you sing a harmony here? Oh, I don't have any training. I don't know how. I'm like, listen, I'm terrible at harmonies too, but if someone teaches them to me, I can do them.
Yeah.
So Jimmy will teach you the harmony here. Yeah, I can't. And it's like, hey, Jimmy, we need to talk to everybody here and go like, look, you guys need to, you know, push harder. God has called you, put you in this position. And, you know, we're asking you to try to work, to strive to grow and be better every time. And
you should always bring your best to
But
God
what we found was
worship.
that was volunteer. They were happy to do it at the level they were willing to do it with. And it's hard being the guy who, like, I wanted to be pro. I wanted to be better every time I hit the mic. You know, I mean, I literally would put my phone in the corner of the room and like press record, and I'd listen to the whole thing to go, oh man, I was flat on that chorus again, and work on it. You know, like that was me.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's hard because it's got to be hard. And maybe you're a lot more level-headed than I am, but like to be a pro level or wannabe pro level guy approaching it in that way, and then dealing with volunteers sometimes. What we discovered was it was a little bit overwhelming for them to be like, whoa, is that what I'm supposed to be doing?
Right.
And then even when you're like, it's not hard, come on, you can do it. And they just don't want to.
Yeah.
What do? You know?
You know, sometimes you have to work with what you have. And I've had those challenges for sure. Like, I mean, right now we're running through Christmas music. You know, and of course that's the hardest.
Christmas music's hard.
Yeah, it is hard, and it's especially hard for volunteers that don't put in the time sometimes. You know, so and I get it because like when you're working a 40 to 50 hour a week job, and you might have a family, when do you have time to sit and practice? And I get it. You know, I have the advantage that I'm a pro player to where. You know, I make my own schedule and I can practice at home all day if I wanted to, you know, or do a session, you know, just I can move my schedule around, but some of these guys can't. I get it.
Yeah.
And so it's challenging. And so, you know, one thing I'll say is, you know, sometimes I guess worship pastors feel the need to put on a lot of music during this time of the year. So it's not just like the normal 4 or 5 songs. They're like do 8 or 10 songs in the service just because it's Christmas time. So I don't know where that pressure comes in from, but I'm kind of seeing it across the board. I don't know. But I just, you know, I think you just have to work with what you have. Like, I mean, great example. I have this one drummer at church, and he can't stay on the click to save his life. And for me, it's like, coming from a pro standpoint, you know, if I was in a rehearsal, I'd be calling it out, really, you know, and it does get called out, but it'd be called out a little bit harsher in my world. But I have to just be kind. And you know what? End of the day, it's like, if that drummer doesn't go home and practice with a click track and just wants to better himself, it's never going to get better.
Yeah.
you know, and so the worship leader could look to me and be like, "Hey, can you get him to do something better?" I'm like, "I really can't. I can help motivate him to practice, and that's really it. It's really on him putting the work in. I mean, everything relies on you in a sense. Like, yeah, we have God as our provider, but I still feel that you have to put the work in. He gives you the gifts.
Yeah.
You still got to put the work in. Like, am I the most incredible guitar player? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Could,
And I think playing on in my opinion, I think playing on the click is hardest for the drummer than it is anybody else. And partly is because, you know, there's those weird, I guess they call them ghost notes that sometimes have to come in between.
Sure.
Or some, you know, like I'm putting out a single soon where I'm like, I don't know how anybody's going to play this because where the drums go sometimes is so in weird places in comparison to what the click's going to be.
Sure.
And I'm just like, how do you guys do that? And so that clearly takes a lot of training.
It does.
Whereas like for me, I struggled with a click when I you know, because for years I just sang to tracks or sang with someone playing one instrument, and timing was an issue for me.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, how do you what I did, and again, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but what I did was I kind of had all my I had all my songs. And I was given tracks to all of them. So what I would do actually is just play, like on my car driving. It would just be the click track. So like, let's say one of my songs, Ocean, click, click, click. And I'd sing a cappella to just the click, where my lyrics would go, and just figure that out. And then before you know it now, like, man, every song I have, there's this internal, I hear the click in my head, even if it's not there.
Yeah.
And that helped me focus on singing to the click. Don't worry about what the drums are doing. Don't worry about what the guitar is doing. Sure. And that's made me better as a musician, just doing that. And you know, some people were like, how, that's not going to work. It's like, well, that worked well for me in the beginning. Now, you know, I've learned to create an instrumental track where I just put the click in it and boost it and just do that. But, you know, it takes practice. And I think people get frustrated with it too soon. And then they right away, I can't play with a click. Yes, you can. You're always playing with a click. It's just not, you just don't hear it.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
It's there somewhere. It's just, you know, it's that unheard thing that's just driving that song, you know.
Absolutely.
It's pretty wild. So musically now, you've toured with, again, you've done the Audio A thing. You've toured with Mandisa. And you've also it looks like you've played some one-off or small, like little small runs with maybe some country acts?
Just a couple country artists, like newer country artists.
So a lot of people don't understand that there is actually, in some cases, surprisingly, I always thought, man, playing with going on a road with a country act is going to be way different than a Christian act, and with some groups that's not the case. A lot because sometimes those bands are like just hardcore believers. Hey, we're just happen to be in this other genre, and then in some other crews, it's the furthest thing from what a Christian band would look like. In your experience, like how big of a difference is it? And in some cases, like there's a lot of people I know who have left working in the Christian music industry to go work in country, pop, rock, whatever, on like those kind of crews. What would you say is the biggest difference? And like I would say the general consensus is the secular side is actually a better world to work in. How would you speak to that?
Sure. So with my experience, I mean, I've spent the last 12 years maybe in Christian music, you know, working with different artists, and then some in the mainstream, some country stuff, but predominantly Christian music. And so I don't know. I mean, as far as the differences, I mean, especially from the Christian world to the country world, like the mainstream world, it's pretty much you get to a certain level in Christian music, and then a lot of guys just move on to country and mainstream, and it's a few different reasons. One is, they have families now, and they have to make a better living, so they'll move on to a country act. So there's usually more pay in mainstream, and you can just do the math. You know, like when you do an arena, you know, with a Christian artist, and you're selling, you know, I don't know, 3/4 of the arena out, you know, or if you got even half the arena. And then your ticket, price per ticket is different. So you look at all the overhead costs. Well, ultimately, there's less money being made in the Christian music industry as opposed to like a large country artist. And so that's
Right.
why you can make more money, because you're playing with an artist that's pulling in more money to pay you, in a sense, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And also, I mean, that music has way more reach than,
sure.
you know, I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, Christian music's just a blip on the radar.
it really is.
It's a small.
And there's particular states that are like, it's big in, and there's states that don't even bother going.
Sure,
You
sure.
know?
I mean, I could just name the number. I couldn't even name the number of times that, you know, people, like, if they see a guitar on me at the airport or at the hotel, or, oh, who do you play for? And you say the name and it's a Christian artist, they just have no idea.
Oh yeah. I learned very quickly, you know, once as an artist, I started getting to share the stage with like people that to me were like, yo, I'm playing with the Newsboys.
Right.
You know, then you'd be at this family gathering and it's like, you know, how's things going with the music? Oh yeah, man, it's huge. We're playing a festival with the Newsboys. They're just like, I don't know who that is. Who cares? It's like, so I just stopped talking about my music career with anyone in my family. Like, just, how's it going? That's good. Yeah. Hey, Jets are terrible again, huh? Let's change the subject. You know, it's like, yeah. And then the worst part has been, so I do my homework, man. Like, hey, and I get mad at guys who I've hired to play for me. Like, they're regular parts of my crew, right? And I'm like, yeah, guys, we got this show with this. And I start naming, like, you know, for argument's sake, hey, I got this, we're playing this festival up in Michigan, man. Yeah, Ryan Stevenson's the headliner. Should be a good show. And I could see in the face, they have no idea who Ryan Stevenson is.
Oh, yeah.
You know, or I get, you know, I've even had like a guy engineering here for me at the podcast, and I'm like, hey, we got Elias Dummer coming in, and he's just like, yeah, that's cool. Who's that? Like, come on, man, City Harmonic, bro. It had one of the biggest songs. Every piano player would sit and try to play the intro to it.
Right.
You know, look how cool I am. Like, you know, come on. Like, it's like, oh, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, that is one frustrating thing. I think another part that's.
But you say Luke Combs to anybody.
Oh, they know Luke Combs.
Yeah, long neck, ice cold beer, never broke. Yeah, like,
of course they know it. They know.
Yeah,
it.
It's crazy.
So it's just it's a bigger reach. And then as far as like the camps, I mean, as far as, of course, there's the camps that like probably party really hard.
Yeah.
You know, and I've known a couple of those camps that, you know, I've had to walk by on buses, like things happening that I just had to just go to my bunk and pretend like I didn't see it.
Sure.
That kind of stuff, and working mainstream. But there are also a lot of Christians that are working in the mainstream as well. There's, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are some.
Yeah.
And so, for me personally, I'm hoping. I don't have any plans in touring with a Christian artist again, from a live playing standpoint. As far as a musician,
Yeah.
I still record on it. I still love the message behind it, but it's just not my focus. And if I'm gonna do any touring, it's gonna be mainstream.
Yeah.
And that's mostly because I think as a Christian, we should be lights in some darker places.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So I had some things that happened, like when I was with Mandisa. So not only was I was her guitar player for about 3.5 years, I took on the role of backline tech for about 3 years of it, 2.5, 3 years of it.
Kind of pulling double duty.
Yeah, double duty. They never could find a tech, and so I'm like, well, if you want to pay the rate, I'll do it. So I, you know, basically got 2 checks doing that. You know, musician pay plus the tech pay, and but that position really allowed me to be in some really cool situations. I'll never forget this, and it was kind of one of my turning points of why I. You know, through the pandemic, I was praying about it with my wife, and we were talking about it, and just it was this moment that happened on the road. I remember it was a tour right before the pandemic hit. It was like in 2020, and I was in Boston, freezing weather. It was 27 degrees. I had to tear down our setup outside because the theater didn't have like a back area that I could do it in when the next show changed over. So we were on tour with Newsboys, and so there was no area to like really tear down. So the back alleyway was the only way. So I'm out there by myself, 27-degree weather. It's about 9:00 now, and so some of the stagehands are walking up to clock in to help, you know, for loadout at 10 or 10:30, somewhere around there. So, well, this guy, you know, he said, so What is it? I heard it's like a Christian show. I said, yeah, it's a Christian show. It's Christian artists, and delivering a great message of God and through music. He said, well, and he started talking about his beliefs. He didn't really know what he believed.
Yeah, that's a common thing. Actually.
And so the beautiful part about it is that I wasn't he looked at me as a crew guy because I was doing crew work and I'm not the performer.
Yeah.
So I had an opportunity to be kind of on some level ground to start sharing the gospel with them. And man, it was just really cool.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And I was like, man, I don't get to do this in my industry. I don't get to talk to non-believers.
Yeah.
And so I got back on the bus and, I was done loading out and they were some of the guys and they were asking me like, or just some of the people on the bus, they were like, hey, how was your night? I said, it was great. I got to share the good news with someone. And they're like, what's that? What do you mean the good news? What do you mean? I said, well, got to share the gospel with someone that doesn't know Jesus in the alleyway. And they all kind of looked kind of like, oh, okay. Like there was no excitement, and it was almost like it made me realize like, why am I here?
Yeah.
And it's nothing on them. And I get it because I started thinking about like, why did they react the way they did? And I get it now. It's because when you're ministering in a bubble of ministry, you can't get out the bubble. So you're not used to ministering to someone that doesn't know Jesus.
Right.
So you don't think about that. So it's almost like foreign now.
It's funny you say that, man, because like I was talking to a buddy of mine driving home. One of my closest friends, Jimmy Tucker, like sometimes he'll be driving home, a long drive, he'll call me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm available. Other times I'm like, dude, I can't do it right now, and vice versa. So anyway, he was driving home last night. We were talking, and man, I tell him this all the time. I go, man, you know what I miss? I miss when like we would put on an event on the front lawn of the church, and his church was like in the middle of like, for instance, like imagine downtown Franklin with all the shops and stores. Imagine like an old church with a lawn right smack in the middle of all of it. So we would put on these events with the speakers blaring out to the street, and a band or whatever. And man, we had times where like we had this one band, some older folks, but they were, but there was just something special about this band. They were known as Gracious Vine, and it was their lead singer. She had this voice sometimes, man. Like, some days her voice was great, and other days it was just all right, because she sung so much, she worked so hard. But this particular day, I mean, and the way her vocal was just echoing in the streets and stuff. It was really wild. We had a police car pull over, and he got out and walked up, and right away, me and Jimmy are like, we're getting a ticket for something, right? So I walk up right away, like put on my full New York, like, what's the matter? And he's just like, that voice, what is this? And we're like, oh man, we're just kind of having a worship event, man. And he was just like listening to the songs, the words. He stayed there the whole entire time and talked to the band, and they prayed with him. And I found out later that like, man, like his wife had died a few months ago, and like, he was angry at God and all, and just like that he kind of believed in anyway. And like there was this beautiful moment because here we are out in the middle of a town, just singing about Jesus, and we'd have people walk up and, just come and sit down and then talk with the pastor would be out there and people were getting prayed for. I miss that, man. I miss that so much because doing this as an artist, again, you're kind of your audience, you're in this bubble of believers that are like, and maybe they're getting fed, but I miss the people who would just happen along this stuff, and even a lot of the Christian festivals, that's not really happening. And I mean, even when you try to tell the churches, hey, tell your congregants, this is the night to invite that person that wouldn't be caught dead in church. Tell them this is the night to come.
Sure.
We try to do that. We try to get the churches to, hey, feed, offer a free dinner. Yeah. Anyone wants to come, free dinner, bring your family.
Sure.
Oh, where's me music at the end?
Yeah.
you know, and what we do isn't necessarily, you know, we're not going to do an hour of just straight worship. Like
Right.
we have some fun. I try to be funny. We'll do a couple worship tunes, you know, because for those who are waiting for it or really wanting to worship, we give them that.
Sure.
But either way, I try to just always share something very real and authentic. And I never know what that's going to be some nights. You know, some nights it could just be like, man, you know, I was a jerk today to somebody and I feel crappy about it. I'll share that right there that night. And to be honest, I share that probably message a lot more than I'd like to admit. But sometimes, hey, man, you know, I really want to feel like I need to explain why this song we wrote was written, you know, and I share about how, it was, you know, the song Keep Fighting was written with my brothers in mind who both tried to commit suicide after their they were dealing with divorces, and how when my mom heard the song, she had given up, wasn't going to fight cancer. Then my mom heard the song for the first time and changed her mind. And I just sort of go into what the song all means in this long, probably 10-minute talk. And it's like, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And it seems to move people. And I miss the event and that real having those opportunities to reach people who aren't believers. And it feels like this bubble gets smaller and smaller as I'm pursuing it as an indie. And I'm kind of starting to wonder, like, do I still want to do Christian music? Because I don't feel like I'm making the impact on the type of people. Because my original goal was like, dude, Christian music found me and grabbed me and pulled me in. You know, it was like, hey, I'm checking out church. It's pretty cool. And like, it was the music that grabbed me to go, church is kind of cool, actually. And then, you know, hey, my wife's like, hey, we were dating. She's like, let's go to this concert. And it's called Winter Jam. It's pretty cool. And hey, there's this guy named Toby Mac. Check his music out. That's pretty cool. We drove into the city and we went to see Toby Mac. And it was, trying to think who was on that. B. Reith was opening. And it was that, oh gosh. I hate that I have not had enough coffee this morning to recall names of bands. Reliant K was on that tour.
Oh, wow.
It was like the Winter Wonders Slam tour or something like that.
That's a good name for it. If you got Reliant K on it.
But it was like stuff like that. And it was just like, these guys are cool. Yeah. Because to me, you know, growing up in a predominantly Catholic area, the closest thing to Christian music is a cantor. You know, when you're in you're in a service and there's somebody going like, he with the you're like, where is he?
Yep.
You know,
I can relate to that because I grew up Catholic.
Yeah. So like one of the first times, and I tell this is true. When I first started dating my wife, like we knew each other many years ago. We reconnected, and her schedule was so busy. Like the only free time she had was a couple of hours on Sunday. So I'm just like, I want to hang out with her. I'll go to church with you, you know? And then, like I said, what changed my life was that first time that pastor gave this sermon, and he told this hypothetical story about a guy. And I'm sitting here like, how does he know? How does he know my story right now? Like literally like repeating back to me things that I've been like, you know, pondering. Yeah. You know, at that time, because I remember telling somebody like, dude, I just feel like I'm floating through life, just existing. I'm not living my life. And then like, here's this sermon, living, not how to like, you know, are you just living and are you just existing and not living? And it's just like, yeah. And literally midway through the sermon, I nudge her. I go, did you talk to them or something? Because you know, and she's like, no. And that like, and it was the music. Cause like I walked in expecting like, this is going to be awkward. And this awesome, like, probably 18, 19-year-old kid. His name was Matthew. I think he played, believe it or not, I believe he played, one of the songs he played was Word of God Speak from Mercy Me on piano. And it was just so good. And I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah. And then other people came out and it sounded like alternative rock music. And I'm like, this is cool. I can do this. Yeah. I couldn't wait to come back. And it was just, the music kept grabbing me, man. And I just realized like at some point when I started this, I'm like, I want to be this. I want to do this that grabs that guy who wouldn't be caught dead in church and go, that's pretty cool. And I've even had, like when I first started singing on Long Island and being part of events, I had people come up and be like, man, you know, you just make like worship feel cool. Like, it's working. I'm doing this, you know? And the last couple of years, I feel like, where'd that go? What? And I don't think it's my fault. It's just that, you know, the places that we get to do and how it gets gone about it's under the guise of being evangelistic, but it's more of just like continuing to feed what people already have. Yeah. It's like recharging batteries that are already half full. you know, and I think that's what's probably taxing me, because I've been getting pretty tired. It's like, where's the fruit? You know, and is that kind of what you went, like, is that sort of how you started to feel? And then you kind of had that culmination of like, yeah, I need to go on to different places.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I mean, I still think the Christian music industry is a great industry for outreach. I think, much like you just said, like, you know, you might have someone in the church that doesn't know how to have a relationship with Jesus. They might believe in the existence of God and the existence of the devil, but they might not have a relationship or that heart connection with Jesus yet. So I still think that's where Christian music is still very important, because there are those people that go to Christian concerts, and there's also just a lot of hurting people in the church. I mean, nobody's perfect.
Well, I think where I thrived for a while, and gosh, the fruit we got from this kind of thing was, you know, some reason some of my music really connected with the recovery community.
Celebrate recoveries
and things like that. And to be fair, a lot of people at Celebrate Recovery are like, you know, we're not talking about hardcore Christians. A lot of cases, a lot of times they're just like, yeah, I got out of prison and this pastor suggested I come here, you know, and they hear, you know, and I've had those guys come up to me and be like, yeah, man, it just seems like you get it, man. And, you know, they'll ask me, what was your addiction? And I tell them, well, I've never been addicted to any kind of drugs or alcohol, but and I tell them some things about me that, you know, I do struggle. Hey, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming platform, please be sure to subscribe, like, or follow so that you can stay up to date with the latest episodes. Also, drop some comments or feedback in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you guys. Once again, thank you so much for the support of the Tom Golly Official Podcast. You know, that I would consider to be an addiction, you know, which to me, a lot of times, like I've said this a lot of times, is like, I feel like, you know, food is a coping mechanism. It may not seem like, you know, it may not seem even close to what maybe you're going through, but, you know, yeah, I feel like I overindulge in a lot of things in my life just for some weird reason as a coping mechanism. But ultimately, what seems to connect with them is I come from the survivor side of, like, I've had to look my two daughters in the eyes when they were, you know, like 6 and 12, or I'm sorry, earlier than that. I think it was maybe 5 and 11, and tell them that they were never going to see their 18-year-old sister again. Because they have a half sister who passed away from a heroin overdose, you know, and a lot of that had to do with her just kind of, you know, she went through the motions at a rehab just to bide her time, and literally, you know, always said things like, why does anybody care? It doesn't matter. She gave up, essentially, you know, and we kind of view her overdose more as a possibly just her sort of intentionally overdosing, but we don't know. But still, coming from that side and being able to share this with addicts who have felt worthless, felt like no one cares, why fight this thing? It's too hard. And being able to share that perspective of, like, man, you know, there are people who would be absolutely broken if you weren't here anymore. Maybe, you know, that sibling that has maybe said the wrong thing and you feel like they hate me. No, they're just scared. And, like, sharing some of that stuff with these people, like, you know what, I never really thought about the fact that maybe my sister's not being mean. Maybe she's just so scared and doesn't know what to do. And I'm like, that's exactly it. She loves you and doesn't know what to do. It's a way to run.
Right.
You know, and having those conversations with people, they're just like, man, I've just never seen it that way. I'm like, well, I'm glad we were here to have this conversation. I love doing the recovery ministries. The sad part has happened. Sadly, what COVID has done, a lot of these recovery ministries don't even meet in person anymore.
Right.
They're like, well, Zoom works and we get more people showing up in Zoom. It's, you know, and my question has been, you know, I inadvertently have offended a friend of mine who runs one of these ministries. I go, man, you got to stop doing the Zoom thing. And he's just like, why? I go, because, dude, how many of these people might have a needle off camera?
Yeah.
Who are just doing this because, you know what? They enjoy talking to people.
Well,
you know?
and that's been a challenge for a lot of churches that are finally starting to meet back in person again, or they've been slowly meeting. People have gotten so used to doing I'm going to watch church online.
Yeah.
and you lose the community aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And so now churches are kind of struggling because it's like not a lot of churches are having the same capacity filled in their churches, and they're looking pretty empty.
Yeah.
A lot of people are tuning in online, but honestly, I think it's important to meet in person because you lose that relationship factor for just tuning in and watching and maybe writing a comment.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you are one of those people, there's nothing wrong with online church. I get it. We get it. We have busy lives, or sometimes people can't make it to church. But if you can, go to church in person if you can. I don't think anything can. Yeah.
Yeah, Liz, I mean, a great example of this, like, man, first off, this podcast, I've had a lot of people I've asked to be guests, and they're like, well, I can Zoom, and I'm like, I know, but I have a great studio. And there's nothing better than being in person. Like,
right.
The way we're communicating right now is authentic, real. It's here. It's live. There's energy to feed off of, and you can read the room a little bit. Like, not that this happened with you, but you can kind of tell, I don't think he's enjoying this topic. I want to move on. With Zoom, it's hard to tell.
It is.
You just don't know. And also, when someone's in their house, it's a weird thing. I will say I'm probably different on camera at my house than I am in face-to-face. Sometimes for better, other times for worse. Especially if, you never know what's going on around the house. Or you may have that one story, man, I'd love to tell this story, but I got a kid in another room. I don't want them to hear about the time someone tried to beat me up, So you can't be as authentic. And so I find that, and even just in church, like, I'm going to sing along at church to the worship.
Sure.
I'm not going to sing along in my living room. It's weird.
Most people don't.
Yeah. So I think that the idea of, I feel like maybe the subconscious reason that people continue to tune in is, well, I can say I went. And how many people are scrolling Facebook while just listening to the sermon? I've been there.
Too.
I've done it. It's why I realized, wow, this, okay, at first I'm listening to the sermon and, pastor with a dad joke again. Ding, Facebook message. Oh, what's up? Oh, yeah, man. Cool. Yeah, let me Google that. Next thing you know, sermon's over.
It's hard to focus.
It really is.
It's hard to focus in today's world in general because there's so many distractions.
Yeah.
Everything from social media to emails. People are always like, I gotta answer this email right now. And they'll spend all day answering emails instead of actually doing real work.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I read a book several years ago called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
And one thing he talked about was he talks about distraction and not being so distracted, and about how to get real work done. And there's a spot in there where he was like, I started doing a reply message, automatic reply message. So I wasn't answering emails all day. It said, I'll be answering emails at 12 noon and also at 4 p.m. If you need anything that's absolutely urgent, here's my cell phone. And so he would get in the habit of not having any kind of push notifications for emails to come in. And then so at 12 noon and at 4, he would check them. That way you're spending 2 hours a day knocking them all out at one time, just going down a list.
Yeah.
Instead of you can spend all day answering emails. Because when I worked in the corporate world, I'd get 100, 130, 200 emails a day of just back and forth banter or discussion or almost like texting or talking. And it was just like,
unsubscribe.
Right. And I can't because it's all work stuff. And so the best thing to do is to really set times I'm going to focus on emails at these times. And then the other times I'm going to work on actual work.
Yeah.
So
I've had to do that. I've not that I've been great at it yet, but I've had to start really breaking down my day, like schedule literally everything, like to the point of like literally when I'm going to eat, when I'm going to get up,
right?
Because I'm an entrepreneur as well as a musician, so I have a couple different business ventures and things. So, like my morning literally starts off with coffee and shipping packages in my out in my garage. Yep. And there's a set time for that, and like literally I'll let people I'll let customers know, like, hey, if this that we ship packages, if they got to be paid before a certain time the next morning, otherwise not going to go out till the next business day. And
right,
because I've had to be intentional, and I find that the nice thing about that is I've been able to put in an hour a day where I make a phone call just to call a friend, someone I care about. Even if, and some, you know, in today's world, most people just don't answer the phone, but when they do, some great talks have happened. It's an old fashioned thing of picking up the phone and having a conversation.
Sure. I think that's important too.
Yeah.
Because we are in a texting world and there's no like connection in
Yeah.
just sending text messages out.
And, you know, and it's also just it seems to become this norm of just, you know, this non-reply world, you know, and that bothers me. Like, I mean, I try my best to, like, it depends obviously on the relationship level, but for the most part, like if someone's texting me, clearly, I don't know. I just struggle with the idea of, it's one thing if they're just telling me something, you know, like, you know, maybe like, oh yeah, the name of that thing you were asking was this. I don't necessarily always feel like I need to go thanks or okay. Like, cool, he sent me that. But if someone's like, hey man, heard that this went well, like congratulations. Cool, the least I can do is be like, thanks, bro. Or if someone's like, you know, hey, like I've had people want to, you know, invite me to maybe write with them or something. And I know them. So to me, a lot of times not responding would be the equivalent of me sitting in the same room as them and them going, hey, Tom, hey, Tom, and me just ignore them. That's how I feel. Other people don't feel that way. They feel like, well, I mean, I'm busy, and when I can respond, I will. And sometimes I forget. And I feel like that's become a bit of a cop-out, in my opinion. I just feel like, come on. I mean, if you got time to go like this a few times on TikTok,
sure.
And what I'm doing, if you're listening, I'm just kind of swiping my thumb. If you got time to swipe your thumb a few times, you got time to go tick, 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 send.
Right.
You know?
That's true.
And I see that a lot. Like, I mean, I've called, messaged somebody about something that is important, and there's no response. But boom, they just posted something on Facebook. And they're actually engaging in conversation on Facebook. Really, bro? Like, that makes me lose respect for that person really quickly. And it's like, okay, I see where we're at. I'm not going to go out of my way for this person. And thankfully, that's been a rare thing. But typically with a lot of my relationships with people that I know and actively work with, I'm usually very clear. Hey, man, when I send a message to you, like, you know, if like at the very least be like, cool, man, like, or at least respond in some way that lets me know, especially if it's, because they know how I am. If it's something that I'm waiting on a response for, and if you're just busy, be like something quick, like, you know, I have to get back to you later. Something, you know, I mean, it's helpful. I mean, I have a business partner, and I have my buddy here is an editor, and there's times where something comes up and I'm like, I need to talk to you now about this. And if he doesn't at least tell me, hey, I'm on a work conference call, which he always does, you know, because then I'm like, oh, that's a priority. He's got to do it. I don't feel disrespected because his main job comes before this.
Sure.
But dude, yeah, hit me up as soon as you can. We have to deal with this. Okay, cool. And we do. But if he was to ignore me, I'd be like, dude, I'm sitting over here floundering. The least you could, you know, you got to talk to me.
Sure.
And it's just a weird world because our phones sync with our computers. You know, there's almost nowhere you're going to be to just not get the messages. However, it's like I'm a podcast host, right? So like my wife even knows, like my phone's not even in here. I'm not even in this room. It's in the other office. If I'm in a session, I'm not going to know.
That's right.
So, you know, it's communication is key with everybody, you know, but it's a weird world we live in now. And I mean, I always think back to like when I was a kid, when you wanted to do something, you had to call everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and you had to do like, is Johnny there? Oh, hold on.
Or mail something.
That too. Right.
So
mail a letter.
Right.
Wow.
Or invitation or.
The nice thing is, and the nice thing though is you used to be able to buy time with the mail. You know, it's like
actually you still can because they're pretty late these days.
Right. But you know, like, I mean, shoot, you know, it's like, oh, I gotta pay the landlord. Well, we get paid Friday. And the first is on Wednesday. Well, just mail the check. He won't get it till Friday. No problem.
Yeah.
Buy time. And it's postmarked. Hey, we mailed it on the 1st.
That's right.
And now it's like, no more checks. You're going to Venmo me. I'm like, oh no. No more buffer. Dang it.
There's no buffers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty terrible at answering text messages. If I look at my text messages now, I mean, I've got a ton, but like I could probably use like a manager or an
Sure.
assistant, but
But to be fair, if somebody knows you,
I've got 398 unread text messages. Okay. And some of these are like, if it's somebody like responded like cool or something, I didn't open it.
yeah.
And then some of them are people that
Yeah.
maybe they asked a question and I overlooked it because I'm busy working or tracking.
Right. And I think if anybody knows you, like, I mean, I don't, I mean, I wouldn't say I know you super well, but I know you enough to know that you're a guy who probably gets in his studio early and doesn't leave till later. Like, and if you do leave, it's kid or family or wife related. And like, you are in it. And if you're a creative, and I am a creative, I do understand when people like myself, when you're in it, you don't want to come out of it.
No,
because it's hard to. It's like momentum. It's like once you're in, to stop, come back to it. It's really hard. It's almost like, hey, go sprint on a treadmill for 10 minutes and then stop.
Well,
come back and do it again. It's hard.
You lose some of your ideas.
Yeah,
but sometimes it is good to come back. I mean, I was up late last night till like 2 a.m. Tracking acoustics.
Wow.
Because my studio is in my home. It's not a soundproof room, but it's treated. But I wait usually when the kids go to bed, so my wife and them don't have to leave if I have to track acoustics. If there's a pressing song that has a really quick deadline, and I'll be like, hey, I really got to knock these out today, they'll leave the house. But a lot of times I try to stay up late, so I'll start tracking any acoustics for projects like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And then I'll finish up about 2, and then the next morning I'll edit it.
Now you got a nice piece of property nowadays with that nice house and everything you've posted. Any thoughts about like building like another building on the property to put a studio?
We talked about it, and there's actually some property next to us that's like just a small strip of land that's owned by an older guy, and we've talked about buying it from him and building out a building, but that's, a build out's like 15, 20 grand for the building, and then you got to buy the property. We could fit another we could do like a mother-in-law suite, and so if we did it, it'd be like a tiny home style setup with soundproofing, but also with a kitchenette in a bathroom or something, to call it a mother-in-law suite in case you ever sold the place. Because most people are like, what do I do with this? Yeah.
I stayed back on Long Island. Now, I never knew like how many pretty sick studios existed on Long Island. And there was a studio. We stayed at an Airbnb. I was kind of on like a hometown. I did a tour, and I always kind of bring myself back up to Long Island to do at least one show. And we stayed at this Airbnb, and something about the layout of the house, I'm like, there's something in this whole second half of this section of this house. I'm like, and it's just something about it felt music, it just felt like it. So we're outside, just enjoying a little bit of fresh air, and there's some guy pulls up and goes in the door. I'm like, hey, what like, you live here? He goes, no, I work here, man. It's a recording studio. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, you want a tour? Sure. We go in, and it's insane. And it's not like, it's crazy how deceptively big it was, the way it was laid out. But we found out like there was some, again, I can't think of some of it, but there was a lot of like insane music, like, gold records. There's some gold records that were recorded in this place. And it's just in a section of the house and stuff. And, but apparently like the night, like we were tracking all night, drums, everything. We didn't hear it. And it's literally on the other side of the wall from us.
Wow.
I don't know what they did. And how they did it, but it was insane.
Wow.
But,
wall within a wall. I
mean,
that's what if you want to do it properly, you have to build like 2 walls basically.
Yeah. See, soundproofing is crazy, man. Like this studio is treated, but it's to keep sound from going out or even echoing in the room. Right. But like, it's
like that. You can
like
hear,
that. Yeah.
You hear car noises.
Yeah.
And
like
things like that.
Now the mics didn't pick that up, but like you can hear a car, this weird, I don't sound like a semi, like with that weird like, sound, but like we can hear that kind of stuff from the outside. But soundproofing's a wild thing. And it's like in my house, man, we have, it's an open concept house.
Yeah.
So like you can hear everything.
Yep.
Everywhere.
Yep.
It's just no.
Especially if you have wood floors.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like I'm like, I'm easily grossed out. So like, in my house, like I have to get up before everybody, eat breakfast before everybody's up. Cause you hear people brushing their teeth and you're trying to eat eggs. You're like, no,
Interesting.
No, I don't love it. We at first we did, because when we first moved into my house, it was originally supposed to just be me. It was like me and my wife, and then her mom lives with us, and now and my kids came to live with me. I had to win custody of my kids pretty early on. They were just like, initially it was like they would just come out on they lived in North Carolina, so they would come out on the weekends, and when they were off from school, they'd stay the summer with me. Like that was the plan.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we got 5 people in this open concept house. It just feels like a big tent. And it's like frustrating. I couldn't imagine, like I'm upstairs trying to do demo vocals. And like my daughter one time was like taking a video from the living room of like, my dad's loud. And I'm like, wow, that is really loud. It just reverberates through the whole house. You can't escape it.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine like especially if you're trying to do some electric guitar stuff, maybe not through a Kemper, maybe through a real cab. Like that's gotta be frustrating for the family sometimes.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep a cab under our stairwell, and it's a large walk-in closet that's downstairs near my like next to my studio. So I punched a hole through the wall and just ran some cables, so I can keep it mic'd up. And it's baffled, but I do crank pretty loud, and so you can hear it definitely. It's muffled, but it's loud.
Yeah. I don't know about like anybody watching or listening, but when you said I punched a hole, I imagined you literally punched a hole.
No. I drilled a hole. I used a drill. I was responsible as an adult.
Yeah. I mean,
so that's what I did. So that's been. I don't have to worry about so much because like. Almost like this room, how it keeps sound from bouncing around or really escaping.
Yeah.
Because of the way it's baffled, the cab is baffled. I don't have to worry about kids being loud or playing when I'm tracking electrics because, for one thing, I've got pads on the mics because I'm cranking it so loud.
Yeah.
There's no chance those mics are going to pick up the kids, whatever, whatsoever. And so, but if I'm tracking like dobro, I can do that during the day. I've learned if I'm using a 57 on the cone of the dobro, I can get away with that with kids playing. No, it doesn't really pick them up. But at night, I track the acoustics with condensers, and of course, there's not really any pads on those.
Yeah,
and it picks up everything. So even if a loud truck goes by, so a lot of times I'm tracking at night also because there's less traffic on my road. Even though I live in rural, we live in a valley, so sound just carries really weird. You know, it's loud. It's still loud, from time to time. So tracking at night is usually the best time when everything's really quiet. I get screwed big time when if I'm on a deadline for a project, my wife and them leave, and then all of a sudden the next door neighbor starts their big 0-turn mower. And I'm screwed for about an hour.
Yeah. See, so it's crazy. A lot of people don't realize how difficult it is, no matter what walk of life you are, whether it's a recording studio work, or even if you're just being a salesman, working from home is really hard.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of reasons. I mean, one, there's some of the distractions that, you can end up escaping to, but, ultimately, like for me, one of the things that I kind of miss about working at home pretty regularly, because I mean, I now have like, I kind of joke around, call this like it's like the compound, because we kind of expanding into another actually section of this building soon. But it's like I enjoy not having to be home and being able to laser focus on the business stuff.
Yep.
The hard part is like when I used to work at home, as things would arise, I was there to deal with it, and so it was pretty even keeled. And when you are at home, it's like you walk in the door and suddenly the kids come to you with everything they've been thinking about all day of like, hey, I need this for school and that. It's just like, I just got home. Right. Wait a minute, and that's the hardest part for me has been like coming back home, and now all these things are piled up that you were unaware of waiting for you.
I'll say for me, because we have 6 kids, my wife handles just about everything. I mean, people don't realize how much she does. She does the most work. I mean, it's the hardest job being a mom or a parent or a dad, but it is like the unsung hero. It is, and no amount of money there's no value you can put on that.
Right.
being a parent and just the amount of workload that there is. So I champion her because she's a champ.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she really does manage our household very well with our kids, and she homeschools 3 of them.
Wow.
While raising the other 3 too as well while I'm busy working a lot of times.
And that's a thing I think happens in a lot of marriages too, like with the idea, like a buddy of mine does a lot of freelance work from home.
Yeah.
And he would lament a lot, like, yeah, it's tough because, like, I think his wife is like a property manager somewhere, and he'd be like, yeah, the biggest struggle we have is like she'll come home and be like, why didn't you do the dishes? And he'd be like, well, I was in sessions all day, like, but you were home. And it's like, no, yeah, but I was working. It's challenging, man. Working from home can be very hard. So if you're able to do it and have it to be super successful without any of like the crazy headaches, man, you are a blessed, blessed, blessed man. I just know me, like I hadn't recognized it until I worked from home for 5 years, and then COVID, with everyone being home all the time, and we'd have a home health aide come for my mother-in-law, and it was like, I can't ever think, I can't ever just kind of have that quiet where I'm able to immerse myself in this and this only. So I had to, remove myself from the home. And I never realized how important being by myself is. Even because when I work from home, like sometimes I don't leave the house for 3-4 days. And I'm just kind of like, what's the world like? Is everyone alive? Like, it's weird. Like, it's like coming out of a shell.
When did I shower last?
Right. And it's, that's very true, actually. That does happen.
Yeah.
You get so busy. It's like, your late nights, early mornings, you're at it, and you're like, wow, I got the rest of the week. Wait, it's Thursday? How did that happen?
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, man. So it's, but yeah, I said, for me, realizing like, hey, man, I have a 30-minute commute every morning. It's the best thing ever. I get to listen to music. I mean, when you have a house full of people, it's hard to listen to music. I don't love listening to music on headphones either.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's been a learning experience for me. And like, just seeing how often you're at home doing your stuff, doing your thing, and you're thriving with it. Yeah. It's like, you're super lucky, man. Most people just don't have the bandwidth or just the wherewithal to want to be in their house that long.
Sure.
Sure. I mean, I'm a guy who used to literally go fishing all the time. I was a very outdoors guy for years. And then being in Nashville, it's like being stuck. You're indoors a lot as a musician.
Sure.
And it's a learning curve for sure.
Well, that's the world we're in now. It's I'd say 80%, 85% of my tracking work and studio work is done from home.
Yeah.
It's rare for me to like go into a studio these days. And COVID didn't help very much. Yeah. And so, but I'm also thankful, like when COVID hit, I'd already had a business built of working on people's projects and,
Now, granted, it sounds to me like most of your tracking experience has been remote at home. Sure. Tracking stuff. Do you ever wish that like you lived in the times where like, hey, we're recording an album. We need a session guy to come in and play on it. And you're in a room. Yeah. With people. I mean, I think Mercy Me, I don't know that they record their final product like that, but I know they write as a band a lot like that.
I don't know. They do. I mean, they'll do a lot of live tracking. In their cabin. So,
yeah, I think it depends on I mean, I know that like earlier records were done like remote. This guy does that.
Sure.
But I've seen video and film and things that, and stuff people in that camp have shared with how they're doing it. They're kind of doing that throwback where the band's in this big circle and everyone's sort of tracking things. It's like, that's cool, man. I've never experienced that. I would love to at some point in my life, but
I think I would rather be in that world just because of here we are talking and having interaction. It's that. And then also what people don't understand, and this is why I charge what I charge, is because I'm also having to self-engineer myself and edit and do all that stuff that an engineer would do. So I'm doing like 2 people's jobs and sometimes 3, because a lot of times the producer's not there saying, hey, I want you to play this. Yeah. I'm having to figure out what they're probably wanting to land on. Yeah. A lot of times.
Like I'm starting to see like this new trend of like a remote vocal recording.
Oh yeah, that's a thing.
Where it's like some engineer sits on a Zoom call and is like, and so this guy I know, he does this where they're on a Zoom call and then he has access to that person's computer so he can make some tweaks to their DAW on their end or something, and like no thank you, man. I would never in a million years do that. I mean, I've had I've been blessed in my last handful of projects to work with Chris Bevins, and man, there's every time, literally without fail, there's times he's come in the booth when, hey, I got an idea for you. I don't know how to really explain it. And, you know, first off, he'll sing and you're like, why don't you be a singer? He actually has a good voice. He doesn't think he does.
He does.
It drives me at the wall. It's like, you should write a record. But he's always like, I'm a terrible singer, but try this. And I'm like, you're actually not a terrible singer, dude. Yeah. But he always has an idea that's golden.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, and I just don't think that would have come through on the Zoom, or there's things he can hear in person. He'll come in and be like, hey man, like I need your cheeks this way. And I'm like, how does he know? Are you watching me?
Oh, yeah.
He hears it.
Oh yeah.
But if there was Zoom and that weird degradation in the audios, no way.
No.
And also just being in that room, feeling a lot of times that like having him, or even like I'd have sometimes like Jorge Lopez in there with me, like he would be like just their energy of like, yeah, this is sounding good. Yeah. It gives you the juice that you need. Sure. If I was on the other end of a Zoom call, like, I don't know if this is any good or not, and I can't read the room, I can't feel like everyone like, yeah, this is good. Like, because you know when the people around you are digging what's going on and when they're not.
Yeah.
And I need that, because if they're not, I'm like, tell me what's up. What do I got to do different?
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
And but the ideas that come from being in the same room, it's like worship, man. You know, like when you're in worship and there's sometimes this oneness that happens and everyone's feeling it, and it's better than anything in the world. And,
oh yeah.
You know, so I'm sure that's probably. I mean, are you ever in the sessions and kind of wishing like, oh man, wish I was in a room with a band instead? Like,
oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can listen back to like a great album. Was it the Wallflowers, the One Headlight song?
Yeah.
You listen to that song. If you're listening right now, go take a listen to it. It's amazing because nothing's perfect. I mean, first the fun joke is that there's no cymbals in the song whatsoever. It's just hi-hat, kick, snare. I don't even know if there's tom work or anything, but you can listen to that song and you can tell they were all in a room tracking it, because things are a little late or parts are a little late here and there, and it's like, but it's real and it's live and it just has this human quality. Was when you work on music and you're getting the parts flown to you, you know, it's like it kind of becomes more mechanical sometimes and more robotic.
Yeah.
It loses almost the human flavor sometimes when you're not doing it all together at the same time. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I think just recording music in and of itself is just a crazy thing, because, you know, there's a magic that definitely happens, whether you're recording as a band or whether you're recording individual things. Like, you know, and maybe you can attest to this as well. Like, I'm sure there's times where you play a part and there was just something about it that bothered you. It technically perfect, but it's like, it's not there. And then something comes and it's, you know, maybe like to someone else, they might hear both takes and be like, it's identical. But no, there is a magic on that other take that's almost unexplainable, but it's there. Yeah. And I think that's the craziest thing, especially like with vocals with me. Like I'll come in, do something, and to me, I thought it was the same way. But the guy the guy engineering it is like, dude, yes, that was it. Like, I don't know what I did different, but okay. Yeah. But there's a magic that can happen. Or sometimes it's like, well, you know what? The only difference was I was more frustrated on that take. It's like, well, your frustration came through and it was what the song needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, like, when I'm, you know, if I'm producing a vocal with an artist, we're doing about 8 to 10 takes per line. Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking for that best line that has the more human quality performance. So
it's just wild. I mean, and then there's magic in the way somebody mixes it.
Sure.
I mean, I had a song.
A lot of magic in the way someone mixes.
I had a song I put out a couple releases ago. First person mixed it, and you know, because it wasn't what we were going for, it just didn't work. Yeah. And it was good, but it was like, this isn't quite what we were going for. And the two mixes are it makes it sound like two different versions of the same song. Yeah. It's wild what a difference someone mixing it with what you're sonically going for can make it be. Sure. And it's just a magical thing. And I think it's awesome that like you found a way to make a living doing it outside of, I would say out of maybe the normal fantasy of like, I'm going to be in a band and we're going to go tour the country. I mean, which is fun. You've done that.
Yeah.
But you're getting to serve lots of songs, lots of artists, and help create a lot of things. Would you say it's more rewarding? Is this more rewarding than being part of a band, going out playing, or is it kind of the same but different?
I'd say it's rewarding to create. Do I miss playing on stage live with humans? Yeah, I miss that, of course.
Yeah.
I think because I'm not an introvert, I'm an extrovert, you know.
Okay.
And so for me it's like and I would call Chris Bevins. I said, "Hey, this working in a room alone by myself kind of gets old. It gets pretty old." And so because I would tour, like, you know, I'd leave Wednesday nights, come back Monday. When I was home, I would be tracking. So I had that time where I was in the introvert state of tracking and being creative. And then I get to go on the road and be in front of people and play and perform. Yeah. So I almost need both worlds, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I love being involved in music. I love all the aspects of it. But ultimately all of it is so that I can go out and play live. Like that's what I do, you know. And that was the biggest thing. Like when COVID hit, you know, I had friends of mine who were like, "Big deal, just live stream." No, I don't want to live stream. I want to go out and play. Yeah, I want to go out and meet people. I want to eat at stupidly named restaurants that have amazing food in the middle of nowhere. I want to be like, because people don't understand. Like, part of my story is I thought I'd live and die on Long Island and never like go anywhere, because until I was 30, I think I'd been to Pennsylvania. That was it. Like, that's the furthest away from home I've ever been. So a lot of times it's like, dude, I'm in Iowa. Like, I never thought I'd have a reason to go to Iowa, you know, or I found myself in Texas. Like, I'm in Texas. Yeah. It's still mind blowing for me. Like, I'm here. Yeah. So all of those things, and even this podcast is sort of part of what I'm trying to create and continue to build and expand. And it's like, because ultimately I want to go and take stages. There's just no substitute for it. And it really breaks my heart the more and more we see things going to this everything virtual, sit in front of a camera. It's strange to me, you know? And like, if I can warn anybody, like, if you've watched this podcast on film long enough, you've probably seen my eyes twitch and do weird things because, first off, like, I've spent most of my life in front of a computer. It's ruined my eyesight to the point where, like, I get massive eye strain, like, from all kinds of lights and weird stuff. Nothing I can do about it. It's over. It's ruined, you know? So you're all going to be twitching and doing weird things with your eyes before you know it. We keep doing this virtual world thing, you know? I mean, who knows? Maybe human beings will evolve and we'll have this one big eye that just, like, you know, can handle all the weird screens, you know?
Cyclops.
Yeah, but it's an absolute wild, it's just a wild thing that people don't realize what they're missing. Yeah. You know, it breaks my heart seeing, I have an 18-year-old daughter. When she's not at work, she's laying in her room on her phone. Yeah. Nothing I'm like, "Hey, why don't you go do something? Sure. Go running, go jogging, go for a drive, call friends." Right. Or, I don't want to. I don't get it. That's all they do. I mean, I just found out, I had found a whole bunch of these old, like, little action figures. And I asked my 12-year-old daughter about she's friends with the neighbor boy, and he has a little brother who's like 5. Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, would he want these?" And she's like, "No. Why would he want those?" Like, I mean, he doesn't play with action figures? No. Like, he has his Nintendo Switch or whatever. A 5-year-old, it's all he does, plays video games. Doesn't play with physical toys. Like, something's wrong with the world. Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, I'm sitting here like, I was 13 and I had every Ninja Turtle. Yeah. 5-year-old doesn't want this?
Well, that's a big thing. Like, in our household, like, we have one television and we don't really have any gaming systems. There's an iPad that floats around from time to time, but a lot of times our kids are out playing. Yeah. Playing with physical toys instead of video games. Most of the time. We just try to instill that into our kids so they don't become, I don't know, gameaholics, or just that's all they do is screens and things like that. Yeah. Because I feel like that, I don't know what that does to the brain. It makes you wonder what it actually does to the brain.
I don't know, man. I mean, it's just strange because you know, and it's weird seeing what has happened. Like I said, my 12-year-old, like from the time she was like 6, like she was always wanted outside, I want to go outside and play. And she did that, and she still does. But a lot of times, these other kids don't want to.
No, they don't.
You know, it's like, let's play basketball. And other kids want to play basketball. Let's play football. Like, she's become like a tomboy because most of the kids in the neighborhood are boys. So she's like, let's play football. You know, and she wants to play, and no, it's cold. It's like, what? Or no, I just got the new Halo. I'm playing that. You know, and we forever didn't have a console in my house. I couldn't. I hate to admit this, but like I loved playing Madden football. Like growing up. When I was a UPS driver in the early 2000s, I would spend I'm on vacation. You know, no one's around. It's just me. I literally spend the entire vacation like it was gross. Like literally on the floor of my living room from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to bed playing Madden. Online, playing seasons, and I would just sit there and eat pizza and cheese doodles and soda, and just like by the end of my vacation, I've gained weight. I've just been lethargic. I don't feel good, and I'm just wasting away my life playing video games.
It's a time waster. Yeah, for sure.
And also too, I would say I was not mature enough to know this isn't good. I'm only sure I can play for an hour. That's it. Go do something else. But it got to a point where I'm just like, you know what? I can't own any consoles. I sold the consoles and started to really just remove anything in my life that was just sucking up my energy. And, you know, recently, you know, just happened to be on Facebook. Oh, wow. Somebody only wants that much for an Xbox 3 or Xbox One. Bought it for my daughter. Like, here. And because I've always tried to use video games over the years as like my kids don't want to do anything but play video games. All right. I'll play Fortnite too, so we could play Fortnite together. And, you know, and that would work for a while. And then they don't want to, then, you know, all it takes, it goes from, this is so cool, I'm playing Fortnite with my dad, to they tell their friend, and their friend's like, you play with your dad? And now they don't want to play with me, you know? So it's like, cool. So buy her a console because, you know, she was bragging to me how nobody can beat her in Madden. I'm like, oh yeah. You want to bet? And so bought her the console. We have a particular, like, Sundays we will play. Yep. That's it. And I'm not even addicted to it. Half the time I'm like, why did I spend weeks playing this game? You know, it's like, ugh. But yeah, it's just I guess it's just interesting when you just look at the way you got to balance life these days. It's and these things that grab your attention. Like, I mean, shoot, I know it's kind of funny how many people I know personally who were like, you know, they hated TikTok. I don't use TikTok. I won't watch TikTok. The next thing you know, they have like a huge channel and they're like lip syncing to everything. It's like, wait, you made fun of everyone. What's going on? You know? But I mean, have you utilized any of that social media to help you gain clients or things like that? Or is it just something you enjoy to share? Or like how do you utilize social media?
Sure. I mean, social media is dangerous to start off with. So, and honestly, I wouldn't have it if I didn't do what I did for a living, because I don't see it as being social at all. It's maybe good to catch up with friends, but I think it's better to pick up a phone, like we talked about earlier. I utilize social media a lot of times because I have partnerships with companies, endorsements, things like that. Also, unfortunately, Nashville is one of those out of sight, out of mind kind of towns. And so I have to make a post from time to time to be like, I'm doing something, you know, and which I'm always doing something. I just don't post it all the time. Yeah. And because, like, I don't think people want to see a picture of my room again where I'm, you know, recording music again. It's just kind of, to me, it's boring. It's interesting to other people, but you know, I'll have to put up something every once in a while. So yeah, I've gained, of course, clients from social media. That's part of it as well. So some independent artists and producers. Yeah,
I think social media as a tool is a great thing. I think that using it as a way, using it as your primary source of connecting with other people, it's a mistake, and a mistake I have made. You know, and I mean, I like to be tongue in cheek. I like to be snarky. Like if you hang out with me enough, you know, I'm the guy who who sometimes says something just for the sake of the laugh. I don't really mean it. It's not even close to what I think, but it was just the fact that someone just said it made it funny, and everyone laughs. And no, I don't mean that. I know. Okay, cool. Like it just was said for the comedic moment. But you try to be even remotely close to that on Facebook, suddenly what you just said is gospel, or like, even if you try to use like an analogy or a little hyperbole, suddenly it's like, that's taken as you're being 100% serious all the time. And, I've got myself into some stuff sometimes where I'm just like, really? That's how they took it? Come on.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of miscommunication within communication.
Yeah.
And emails, texting, writing, and that can lead to a lot of miscommunication because people interpret things differently.
Well, I had hoped Twitter had started this thing where, like you can record a voice post, and it just didn't take off, and it's like not there anymore.
Wow.
And I had hoped that would happen just because podcasts are taking off. Anyone has a podcast these days, and because it's important to be able to get yourself across properly, and texting or written words don't always do that. And it's like, I thought, hey man, that actually might be really cool. Even because, you can now use tone.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's just kind of like, if you're on a Facebook post and someone is being very elitist and like acting like everyone's stupid, and you type the words maybe like, you're right, everyone's a moron. There are going to be people be like, wow, you agree with him? No. What I'm saying is, you're right, everyone's a moron.
Right.
Like, but no one can read that, and there's no emoji to really get that across. And most people don't even know what half the emojis mean anyway. No. So it's like, it's so easy to be misinterpreted through words.
Sure.
And that was sort of, for me, I'm easily misinterpreted all the time. Or did I just make up a word? Misinterpreted? Did I say that?
Misinterpreted.
Yeah. I misinterpreted often in written words. So I'm like, hey, what if I do a podcast and I can show people that, like, even when I say something, sometimes I'm like, I'm just trying to figure this out. I think that's the thing. We're all just babies in a sandbox trying to figure out what to do with the sand that's around us.
Sure.
That's what I feel like in life, and some people are figuring it out a little faster than others, and that's okay, you know. And I think that if we all viewed each other as that, remember, we were all just a screaming baby at one point, and a lot of our behaviors, a lot of the ways we are, have a lot to do with the environment we were raised in, and things like that, where like, I think we just need to have a little more compassion behind it. And I've had to learn that, in counseling, understanding more about then I do think every person should seek counseling, because gosh, it's been so good for me to understand myself, go, wow, you know what? I react to those things, and it's probably has a lot to do with these things that happened to me when I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, or continually happened from the time I was a child into early, maybe my early adulthood. And it shaped why I respond that way.
Sure.
And now knowing that about myself, I'm going, wow, that's every person around me. So maybe it's not their fault unless they're aware of it. You know what I mean? Then it becomes your fault. So maybe it's not their fault. Maybe I need to approach this differently, because if this is what, if I'm having these revelations about me, I'm having these revelations about everyone. Whoa. And maybe that's the key to, especially for a lot of Christians, that's the key for us to love others as Jesus did, to understand, wait a minute, I'm flawed. I am this way because of these things. I wonder what happened to them to make them that way.
Yeah.
And have more compassion, rather to be like, he's a terrible, horrible human being. He probably just doesn't realize why he's even reacting the way he is, or treating people the way he does.
Sure.
I think we're all a result of things that have happened to us.
Yeah.
And then there's the flip side of that, where you're like, well, once you become an adult, everything that does happen to you as an adult is fully your responsibility. It's on you. It
is.
And now, yes, some can make the argument of like, well, what if a drunk driver crashes into you? Well, yes, the fact that that person crashed into you is beyond your control, but you made the choice to go out, drive that route, drive that car at that particular time. So own that fact. Well, no, I chose the job that is in that place, and that's the route home, and I chose to drive, and that's life. Like, you know what I mean? If like we kind of take the victim mentality away from things and understand that things happen.
Yeah,
And, you know,
more people here, I think, need to be reminded that things just happen out of your control.
That's
and
right.
So, I mean, even the life I've got, like my job's not in my control; it's in God's control only.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah.
So that's a realization I had to have when I moved to Nashville is putting trust completely in God, and I can't make it all happen. He's got to.
Now, sometimes putting trust in God is also putting trust in yourself in the way that God gave you abilities.
Sure.
And you need to trust yourself to use them for his glory and for to benefit your family. If you're good at something.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it is you still need to put the work in,
mm-hmm.
but you know, God will help provide opportunities. I'm a firm believer in that.
Oh, 1,000%, man. I mean, God has opened doors for me. Even recently, some things have happened where it's just like, you know, I mean, when you're an entrepreneur, there's times when, you know, you put a lot of money out waiting for the return and it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's like, where's the return? And then the return comes from a different angle.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, all you, you know what I mean? Like God is just super good. And, you know, man, it's similar to you. Like, I mean, the whole music thing, man, just being in Nashville, sitting across the table from a guy like you is all God, man. Only God can create these things because, man, I often, and, you know, I don't mean this to like pick on myself, but like, man, I don't feel like I'm good enough at anything to be doing any of the things I'm doing, but God's making it work for some reason, you know?
Sure.
And it's just like, I mean, I look at my family life, my wife, it's like, man, I'm not a good enough dad to have the amazing kids I have. I'm not a good enough like husband for my wife to be as awesome as she is, you know? God is doing something, man, you know? And that's the biggest thing that keeps me. I mean, I have people in my camp who are like, dude, it sounds to me like you want to branch out to secular music and secular entertainment, which, yeah, there is a little bit of a longing for it just because sometimes the Christian stuff feels a little handcuffed.
Sure.
But I'm like, but man, you know, I want to just point people to God. So wherever that is, I'll do that. But I'm never going to abandon my Christian message because God is real. He is all powerful. He's incredible, regardless of, you know, like me, I struggle with a lot of church hurt, a lot of church issues. The church to me even though it's supposed to be a reflection of who God is and what Jesus did, it's not always. And you know what? Neither am I. So, you know, for me to judge anything or is really kind of wrong, even though you know, it's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. But ultimately, man, that's the goal. And I think that the way you go about a lot of what you do is just absolutely inspiring because, you know, there's never been a question of like, what does this man believe? You know, who does he believe in? It's always been very obvious. It's, you know, you're one of you're one of a bunch of people in this town that, you know, you clearly you're living out what you believe. And that's inspiring, you know, and I, you know, I think that it's really, really cool too, that you're very authentic. For argument's sake, you know, you shared that you really enjoyed a particular flavor of whiskey.
Sure.
Which I got to tell you, man, thank you for posting that. I didn't even know that was a thing. Oh, yeah. You know, and you know, there's a lot of people who would just like, oh, I can't share that I have a little bit of whiskey at home with my family, you know, when I'm relaxing. Sure. There's people who wouldn't do that, and I love the authenticity of it because I feel like there's so many people who hide it, and I don't feel like that's the way to go, you know? And
sure.
I mean, that's, is that something that you struggle, if you ever had to struggle with that of like worrying, like, you know, is there parts of me I need to hide because of this Christian faith? Is that ever a struggle for you as well as me?
It was, it was always kind of like a no to like post anything that had to do with drinking or things that are more mainstream. I'm talking about posting like through social media. And you know, when I was in Audio A, management strongly encouraged us not to post any pictures of drinking or any kind of drinks and things like that. because it does send a different message, and I understand that there are people out there that believe in God that may struggle with alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
So maybe it triggers something and creates a downfall effect for them if they see a picture of me with a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of wine or something. But I don't know. I'm 39 now, and it's just like I'm an adult. I'm responsible. I don't.
I mean, it's
go out becoming belligerent, and
it's definitely a challenge. I mean, it's interesting because, again, I've worked with a lot of recovery ministries, and to be honest with you, I don't drink enough of anything to ever I mean, even organically, if you photoed and videoed my entire life, you probably rarely ever see a drink. I just don't drink that much. And when I do, though, it's going to be my wife's birthday or my birthday or, some kind of special occasion, But as far as that goes, it's interesting because I've heard somebody say, listen, just because certain people are addicted to something and it's their downfall.
Sure.
There's the mindset of you just don't publicize it because it could be interpreted wrong as, well, they say it's okay, so why not just go crazy? And but at the same time, there's people who say things like, there are people who are addicted to things and it's their downfall, that for 99.9% of the world, it isn't a thing.
Sure.
So I think I'm trying to explain this properly because
you're basically saying you can have addiction to anything, whether it's
pretty much
labeled.
Yeah. I mean just like video games, for argument's sake, for me, it was a time waster, and ultimately it wasn't the video game it wasn't necessarily the video game that was the problem. It was just, I had some stuff in my life clearly that I would need just blocking out by focusing on this thing.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it was, and let's face it, I really feel like that's a lot of addiction. A lot of addiction it's something else drawing you to run to something else a lot of times, more than that thing drawing you to it.
Sure.
And so a lot of times we blame the thing that people run to, where it's I think that's only a small part of the problem.
Sure.
But we tend to chastise, as Christians, we chastise the people who are open about those things. I was really grateful for seeing the Ren Collective guys. They have a podcast. It's called what is it? Where's the joy in that? And it's a short podcast. They talk about some things, and they talked about drinking, and they admitted that hey, you know what? Socially having a drink or two is a good thing. And, they kind of just put their stance on it. And they're like, I know that some people are going to violently disagree with us. And, they made a lot of great points.
Yeah.
And even, I think they even used a couple of pieces of scripture to kind of go well, here's what they're actually talking about in that scripture, And also you just think about the founders of Christian music, which are the old hymns, they'd sit around and drink, and they were drinking songs.
Yeah. I've drank at the Ren Boys at the after shows and things like that. And, we'll have time, but we're done with a show, and we might want to go out afterwards and just to be social.
Yeah.
And nobody's getting crazy. Nobody's getting drunk. And people think, oh, they're out drinking, getting crazy drunk, and they're supposed to be Christians. But
me and my band, we were here at this. Me and actually it was pretty much everyone in that was here has played for me or done something involving my kind of my little mini empire that I'm building. But we had a little Christmas party here, and we just sort of, it was kind of dumb. We'll be releasing that soon, but we sat around here, and I basically allowed them to all tell silly stories at my expense. One time I got really sick on the road, and how funny it was funny because, some stories and just dumb things. And then I kind of threw back funny stories about them, and it was cool. But, the truth is, man, before we came in to film that, we all hung out and had one drink. Yeah. We sat around, talk about the show, just catch up, have a beer, come in. All right, let's do the episode. We did the episode, and then we played a game. We filmed that too. That was fun. And it's no one's getting plastered. And honestly, we talked about it later. Dude, is everyone glad they at least had that one drink? Even the one guy who rarely ever drinks was like, yeah, man, because I was nervous about being on the mic and on the podcast, and it helped me. It's that's sort of the point. I don't think alcohol was ever designed for people to drink a 6-pack or a case in one sitting.
No.
It was never designed for that. And I think that in the right context, it works out. And of course, Jesus turned water into wine. People argue it's not the same thing. I just don't know about that. But you know, it's just that I think the Christian industry is have it handcuffs, especially a guy like me, worrying about like, you know, who could I potentially work with that might be upset if they were to know that, like, you know, I'm really grateful for Brandon Bagby's post about the peanut butter whiskey. Like, that was a wild thing. I mean, it's funny. I've told people about it and they're just like, that's a thing. Yeah, you got to check it out. It's pretty cool. Yeah. And, but man, it is just absolutely awesome that you came in here today and just, you know, talked about, I mean, everything you talked about is just really, it's real stuff. It's really good. And, I enjoy having guests come on. People can kind of get a little glimpse into their life outside of maybe what they know on Facebook or their stories and whatnot. So, couple things as we wrap up. If there's a like an up and coming guitar player, artist, whatever it might be, that's just, hey, I want to get started. What's, in your opinion, the best first 3 steps they can take?
As far as like, are they already playing? You mean?
I mean, they're already playing. They play at their church, but they want to, you know, they want to tour in some capacity. They want to play with other artists. They want to be like, they want to record. They want to do like you're doing and record for people. Like, what would you say the top 3 steps toward making that a reality, coming out of just, I just play at my church and in my living room, but it's time to take it further. What would you say those 3 steps need to be?
I say the first thing is if you want to tour, you need to move to a music city, whether it's Nashville, Atlanta, New York, LA. You need to be where music is happening all the time and there's more opportunities. Because if you're living in a town that's not a music town and you're playing at a bar and you're making $50 a night, that's not making a living. So if you want to make a living in music, you need to be in a music town. You need to immerse in the community of the music town. That's probably one of the first steps.
Yeah.
Second step, if you want to get into recording, I mean, the way I really got into recording was, through touring. I built up a reputation that I do a great job on the road. And then I would get invited to studios from time to time. And then I kind of fell into that world as well, into the recording world. So I think you got to kind of like build a resume, in a sense, of working professionally in the industry. You can record from home. You have the tools and abilities to do that now with a laptop and just a couple of simple items.
Yeah.
But as far as like getting work in the industry consistently, you got to build a reputation and basically a resume in the industry.
And it's not going to happen in 6 months.
No, not at all. I'd say, you know, when I started doing the home tracking thing, it probably took a good couple years to really build that foundation as far as a client base.
Yeah. I mean, and to expand on that advice, I mean, what I've seen work for a lot of people trying to, you know, kind of crack into those things is, first off, you find a church that has a lot of those pros in it. It's a great way to just meet those people and connect. Sure. I mean, like Zeal Church right now is this pretty up and coming big church in Nashville that has tons of pros on it, and well, at all levels. Some that are kind of just starting the pro game, and others that are just have been there, done that, bought the T-shirt.
Sure.
That you know, and I'm not saying, hey, join a church just to network, but like you can visit on a Sunday and say hello.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
But
and there's networking opportunities downtown. If you come to Nashville, Whiskey Jam is a great one.
Oh yeah,
that's held at Winter's Bar. It's a lot of just country acts. They'll go up and play 3 songs, and it's a great place to like meet and network with other musicians. If you don't want to network within the church, that's a good spot if you want to get into maybe some country music.
Yeah, I mean, so again, ultimately it just boils down to just showing. You got to show up.
You got to show up.
You got to show up, and don't be so quick to turn around and run home.
Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, and I've said this probably in like 4 episodes this season, but basically, Tony Robbins talked about like, if you want to be successful, you got to burn the ships.
Yeah.
You want to take the island, you got to burn the ships, because if you're only left with two choices, death or success, most of the time you're going to be successful in some way. And if going home's an option, you're probably going to end up back on those ships.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to completely burn the ships, this is where I am, and you got to find a way to make it work. And to be fair, plenty of people do come here with one expectation and one plan and end up finding something that they end up doing that's completely different.
Totally.
That's way more successful. We had Chuck Butler here on the podcast, and he came here to be part of a band, and they were going to conquer the world. And it didn't quite pan out like that. And here he sits years later as a very successful Grammy-winning and double-winning songwriter and producer.
Yeah.
And I mean, he even said, he's like, well, I'm not doing what I came here to do, but I'm certainly glad I stayed.
Sure. Well, that's the one thing is like you have to, you can't just, it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
And they say Nashville is a 5 to 10 year town. It's very, very true.
Yeah. That was tough hearing when I first moved here. I moved here and I was told it's a 5-year town. I was like, what does that mean? And they're just like, well, basically like it's going to take about 5 years before you're finding yourself like where people you message will message you back.
Sure.
People are like, oh, cool. Yeah. You're one of those, you're here. You're part of this.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, I need it now.
No.
Well,
I can attest to that too, because when I first moved here in 2009, I emailed every record label, every booking agent, management company, anyone in the music industry. I was trying to find a touring gig because that was my focus. I wanted a tour, and I didn't get a lot of responses.
Yep.
And it's funny because like I think it was a couple years ago, I was looking back through old sent emails from 2009, and I'm like, oh wow, I work with that person now. I work with this person now, and that person, and I'm like, they never responded to me back in the day. Yeah. It's kind of funny, but it's true. It's 5 years to get established, and
it also a lot of it too can come from like this is what's happened for me. So I've been here 6 years, and I'm now just seeing like, wow, you know, it really was a 5-year town because COVID sort of slowed some things down for me, but like going into 2020, like, whoa, things were clicking, man. Like I had more shows lined up, main stage on some festivals, talking to 2 different bigger bands about possibly touring with them, which is unheard of. Indie artists touring with them, to even be in that conversation, to have their manager go, yes, let's sit down and talk about it. And then COVID ruined that. And now it's not even a possibility, but it's, I've experienced that 5-year town thing, and you know, it's so true. And there's plenty of times I'm like, I got salty. This is ridiculous. You know, I'm doing everything I can. It's not working, but this is something that happens. But what was key for me, and it was huge, and I'm sure that you'll agree with this. Like, so for me, one of the things that happened was through sort of happenstance, I met Jorge Lopez. Yeah. And, you know, in getting to know him and working with him, I mean, and that guy, man, first off, so much love for him. And his family's going through some terrible stuff right now. I've been praying, and it's been hurting my heart knowing that he's going through what he's going through right now. But he would tell anyone who would listen that he's working with me, and he was excited about the projects, and he would share. So there are people who've heard of me because of him. Sure. And he's in the inner throes of the industry. Yeah. That's what takes years, is the more people you know, the more people that are happy to and that's the thing. Everyone says, oh, it's about who you know. I believe it's more about who's willing to say they know you. Yeah. So it's like, and to be fair, I've made mistakes. I've made it where there are people who are like, just, hey, I blew it. And they're like, I'm not gonna ever tell anyone about this guy. Yeah. You know,
it's a big town, but it's a small town. Jorge was one of the first people I met 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. It was like 2009. I was playing Exit In with this artist that doesn't exist anymore as an artist, but he came to the set just to check it out because he had a roommate of his that was playing bass, and we kicked it off and started a relationship, a friendship. So I've known Jorge for about 12 years now, which is really weird to think about, like how fast time has gone by. But it just shows you how small town It is.
And it's also interesting one thing, and we'll wrap this up in just a minute, but what I always thought was amazing is like how many people in this industry who have come out here who have a story where someone told them, look, this isn't for you. This isn't going to work for you, you know, and then they end up go do huge things. You know, I remember like Chris Sly is a buddy of mine, you know, where I mean, you know, we both have a similar story of someone we really look up to and respect trying to be like, I don't think this is your thing. Like he had a music teacher of his tell him like, look, you'll never, you just don't have it. You'll never be a professional anything. And he went on to be American Idol. He's done some big things in music, you know, and he's starting to do even bigger things as a songwriter right now. It's huge. And I'm so excited for him to see that. But to have that kindred, even with George went through something where someone told him, look, you're just not, you'll never make it. You'll never be anything.
Sure.
And then all the stuff he's doing is just like cool. And I mean, did you have that kind of thing at all? Like something you had to prove at all? Like where you maybe had a defining moment where someone said you couldn't, and that was sort of a little chip on your shoulder as well?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that's an interesting kindred that everyone in this town has. Someone said you couldn't. We all went, watch me.
Well, it's because they don't understand.
Right.
So it's like, you know, it took my parents, I don't know, I don't even know if they understand it still. But like people don't understand that music is a real job.
Yeah.
You can make a living playing music or doing music for a living. And people don't understand that as being a real job because there's no application for it. There's no real training for it. Right. And it just has to happen. Yeah. If it's going to happen. So,
I mean, there's a bit of the entrepreneurial spirit there that a lot of like, I think I mean, I know that you're younger than I am, but we came up in a similar like parenting style anyway. Sure. Wasn't that huge of a gap, but like it was, for me, it was like, you know, you get a job with 401k and retirement and, you know, just that felt like, I mean, I watched my dad be miserable most of his adult life. Yeah. You know, I've worked. You only get to do anything good on vacation. It was like, I don't want that life, you know? So I always chased things that gave me freedom. And music can be freedom because you could say yes to certain things, no to certain things. Sure. You can work super hard until you can find spots to go, I'm going to kind of take it easy for a little bit. And you're able to kind of have control of the throttle, and everything you do belongs to you. No one's like, okay, sure, a band could fire you, but there's other bands, you know, and so it's just one of those things. And I think a lot of people, like, especially like in my family, no one has the real entrepreneurial spirit. It's more of the corporate union job. Like, that's why I was a UPS driver for 7 years. Like, okay, I'll do it your way. Sure. And it almost killed me. So I totally get that. And I think that's, but I still find that be a very interesting thing that most of us have in common. If we have anything in common, we have someone in our lives that had said, like, you can't do this, don't do this. And we're just like pushing against that. And I think that's one of the coolest things. And, but yeah, again, back to what I initially said is that, man, you know, just getting to know people and, you know, building those relationships, serving and being willing to serve others. It's just, before you know it, again, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you know, you go from like, you know, maybe someone like me where I was on the couch for 3 months, like literally crying when no one was around because I was so bored and sad and like, why did I move here? To 5 years later, or 6 years later, I'm inviting people on my podcast, and like very few people are, and the only reason people are saying no is because like, dude, I got a lot going on. Could we do February? You know, I had 1 or 2 people just be like, I just don't do podcasts. But they're like, but if I ever do one, I'll do yours. Like, wait a minute, how's this happening? You know, it's been mind-blowing for me. So it truly is a 5-year town. And probably anywhere you go. You go to LA, it's probably 5, 10-year town. Probably so. You got to be willing to put the work in. So if someone wants to follow you, reach out to you or anything like that, what's the best way to do that? What's the best social media outlet for that?
Sure. I mean, I'm most active on Instagram, but not really active, but active enough. You can just go to my website, brandonjbagby.com or brandonbagby.com. They'll both point to the website, and they have all my socials. But, yeah, you can reach out. Probably, if you want to reach out to me, the best is just to go through my website and fill out the contact, and then
That's the
we'll
way.
chat. That's probably the best way.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So go check out BrandonJBagby.com. You can get in touch there. He does go on Instagram once in a while and kind of breaks down how he does some things. Those are really interesting to watch. By the way, he's done that with stuff he's tracked on for me, and that's been really cool. For me, part of that is like, dude, people have never heard of me. Now have just heard of me. They're going to think I'm a big deal. I like this. So thank you for doing that. But man, and do you have anything big coming up that maybe people need to know about?
Not really. I mean, I'm just kind of got my head, my head's in the studio right now.
That's it.
That's pretty much just working on different projects for different people.
All right.
Different genres.
Well, Brandon, again, I'm a big fan of everything you do. I appreciate you being here, and just thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom.
All right. God bless you.
Thank you.
Wrap it.